All right. Well, it looks like we've got some people that have joined in today. So welcome everybody. It's nice to be here on a Saturday afternoon together. Um, we're excited that we are getting the opportunity to co-host this experience with Climate Reality, which is 24 hours of reality countdown to the future. This is an event that Climate Reality puts on every year where they seek to do presentations for a 24-hour period straight all across the globe. And so tonight I get the honor to be here, not necessarily in my role as with Elders Climate Action, but instead to be here as a Climate Reality trained leader, and to be joined with a few other Climate Reality trained leaders. And so we'll get started in just a minute. I want to let you know that you can ask questions of our speakers today at any time by using your Q&A box. And you can find that by just hovering over the window and clicking on Q&A and then entering your questions there. If you have any technical issues or anything like that, or any information you'd like to share, you can chat, use the chat box. So tonight, it's actually still the afternoon, I think, for most of us. We are joined by Bill DeVincenzi and Francis Stewart, and they are Elders Climate Action members and Climate Reality trained leaders. And Bill DeVincenzi is also the treasurer of Elders Action Network and an active volunteer of Elders Climate Action. And so we're very excited to have him here. And Francis Stewart is a very active member of our leadership team at Elders Climate Action. She's a co-leader of our education committee. And so we're really excited to have the opportunity to bring 24 hours of reality to Elders Climate Action members. We all three were actually trained in the same training in Los Angeles in 2018. So that's kind of fun too. So Bill, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you get started.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'm going to share my screen here. Put this on. There we go. Okay, hi everybody. I am very pleased to, this is the second year now in a row during 24 hours of reality that we've done this presentation for Elders Climate Action. So Jen and I have done this before, and we're happy to have Francis join us in the process. So just a real brief background on myself. I was in corporate finance for 28 years, the last 10 years as a chief financial officer. I retired, or so I thought, and then fell in love with teaching and started a 25-year career teaching at San Jose State University in their College of Business. I retired again, or so I thought, and looked for what else am I going to do with the rest of my life? I mean, it's like I wasn't ready to hang up my spikes quite yet. And the thing that came to me was I went to a meeting, an ECA meeting in early 2018, and said, okay, yeah, this is it. This is really what I want to get to do. And like Jen said, we were all trained in 2018 in LA with 2,200 of our closest friends. And it was really quite an experience. Al Gore was very inspiring. And so I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I started giving climate reality presentations later that same year. I joined the Santa Clara County chapter of Climate Reality and am now co-chair of the Speakers Bureau. And so this is something I love to do because it combines what I did in teaching with my passion right now, which is climate change. As far as the talk is concerned, just so you understand where I'm coming from, this is bipartisan. There's no political affiliations whatsoever. In fact, to me, it's a moral and humanitarian issue, not a political issue, but unfortunately it has become a political issue, and so we'll deal with that. Scientific method, this is what you're going to get is a result of scientific research from Climate Reality, from my own research. I've vetted all my sources, so I'm very confident that what I'm going to tell you is good. And why am I doing all this? Well, because I am concerned about the future that I'm leaving for my children, my grandchildren, all future generations. I tell this to my students as well, and all life. So the talk itself is broken down into 3 parts. Must we change? Can we change? And if we can, will we? The big question. So first of all, in the first part, it's like, okay, must we change? Is this really a real problem? Okay, is climate change real? There's a lot of deniers out there who say, oh, this is a hoax and what have you. And, and is it a problem? And so I will address that right now. Starting with the big picture, picture, this is Apollo 17 as they were heading to the moon, and they looked back and they saw this incredible sight, right? I mean, wow. And the thing that just makes you awe-filled is this is where we live. This is our home, and you don't see any boundaries. You don't see any fences. It's all one unified whole. And this is what we have to preserve. And right around the very rim, you see this kind of a little outline in blue. And what that is our atmosphere. So this is a blow-up version of it, and it shows you this blue haze here is about 5 miles thick. And you say, well, that's not bad. But well, when you consider this, it surrounds a ball. It's 25,000 miles in circumference. That is just incredibly thin. So that's our thin layer of atmosphere, and that's what all life is dependent on. So now global warming 101. So the sun sends down light waves that come through that atmosphere, that hit the planet and warm it. Some of it is visible light, some of it's ultraviolet, which gives you sunburn, but the rest is heat, the infrared. Now, most of that radiation is absorbed by the planet and warms it up. A lot of it is radiated back out into space, a lot of that infrared or heat. You notice it going right back up through the atmosphere. But the atmosphere traps some of that as well, and radiates it back down. And so this is what actually warms the planet even more, but more importantly, it keeps a nice, steady, constant level of warmth on the planet. Now, as that blue layer thickens, and it is thickening because we are spewing 152 million tons of pollution every 24 hours into that thin atmosphere. And so what that's caused is a lot more, you can see in this slide, a lot more of that heat being kept back down by that much thicker now layer of atmosphere. So the thicker that layer of atmosphere gets, the more heat is transferred, and so hence global warming. And this is what they call the greenhouse effect, right? Keeping that heat trapped here on the planet. Now, a couple of things just to as we go forward, you hear global warming, you hear climate change, you hear climate crisis. Global warming is the cause. It is the root cause of climate change. Climate change, can go either way. It can be hotter or colder, but climate change is the effect of global warming, and the climate crisis is the result. So where does all this come from? So the largest source of global warming pollution is the burning of fossil fuels. You'll notice that this chart starts in the late 1800s, and that's important because that was the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And so from that point forward, you see the impact of humans on the amount of carbon that is going into the atmosphere, because this is all from the machinery. And you notice that how rapidly that is climbing in recent years. Where is it coming from? Everywhere, from landfills to transportation, agriculture, coal plants, coal mining, crop burning, and of course forest fires, which is having a huge impact right now, and oil production. All of those are huge sources of greenhouse gases. And if you look back and say, well, okay, well, so how does that affect me? Look at the last 800,000 years here, and you'll see that the particles of CO2 per million has varied between 200 and 300 parts per million for that whole period until the Industrial Revolution, basically. And then all of a sudden, you see that carbon dioxide spiking straight up. And in fact, 2019, we're at 417 parts per million. So it is continuing to go up, and that's a problem. And you say, well, why is this a problem? Well, let's compare that carbon dioxide, which is now the blue, to the heat of the planet, which is red. Notice that there's a bit of a correlation between those two. In fact, it's a perfect mirror image. The only difference is that the red is slightly offset in time from the blue, which is important because it means that we have some time to fix this. Because if that heat, if that red goes up where that blue one is, life on this planet will be extinguished. That can never happen. So not only do we have to stop putting more carbon dioxide up in the atmosphere, but we have to bring that spike back down into normal levels. So that's the job in front of us. But this is the problem that the CO2 is setting before us, okay? So are we feeling the impact? Yeah, 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have happened since 2001. And in fact, the hottest of all have been the last 5 years. And in fact, 2020 is going to fit right in there. And 2020 may be number one. So, and it's well on its way to matching 2016, which was the hottest year of all. Besides, what we're seeing on the land, it's interesting to note that 93% of the extra heat is going into the ocean. So you're saying, wow, so what effect does that have? You can see from this chart that the heat content has increased dramatically since around 1990 or so, and that it's going up very rapidly, especially in the surface area. And why is that important, to look at that? Well, because warm oceans impact hurricanes dramatically. Warm oceans lead to more intense hurricanes because cold water tends to short circuit or slow a hurricane down. Warm waters just feed it. So we get more intense hurricanes. They intensify more rapidly. And right now, Delta, which I'll talk to you about in just a minute, is setting a record for how quick it went to a category 4 in only 30 hours, which is actually the fastest they've ever recorded it. So this is happening right now as we speak. Because of the warmer air, there's more evaporation and more water in those hurricanes. And so 1 degree Celsius increase would add 7% more water vapor. That becomes important in just a minute. The storm surges, and again, Laura and Delta, those two have huge storm surges into Louisiana and Texas just in the last month. And these hurricanes tend to stay in place longer, and I'm going to show you what the impact of that is in just a second. So this is Hurricane Harvey, and Laura and Delta are following the same path. These poor people are getting slammed. But Hurricane Harvey crossed the Gulf, and where waters were 4 degrees Celsius higher. You remember 1 degree would be 7% more precipitation. So 28% more moisture in that hurricane. And the result was that we had 50 inches of rain fall on Houston in the space of 5 days. Now that means, one, that hurricane sat there for 5 days and just deluged them. And 50 inches of rain is astronomical. Here in California, in the San Jose area, our entire season, we've had 7 inches of rain. Now, I don't know where you live, but you have, obviously that varies. But imagine 50 inches is like, if you've ever been to Niagara Falls, it's like 500 days of that much water. Think about that one. That's pretty astounding. And here's, then this, I just put this in this morning because the hurricanes are increasing not only in intensity, but in volume and number. Delta is the 25th named storm this year. The average is 12 in a whole season. And by the way, we're only halfway through the hurricane season. And just an interesting little factoid, after 21 names, they start using Greek. So that's how Delta comes in. It's the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. So they've had to, they've exceeded our normal alphabet and are starting to get into Greek now. And like saying here, Laura just hit late August, and now here's Delta hitting exactly the same spot right now. As I said, it intensified in record time. It's the 10th named source to hit US soil. That's the most in 1 year, 10 storms to hit the soil. And 5th hurricane, which again is the most since 2005, and y'all remember Katrina. And again, we're only halfway through. So hurricanes are getting more and more here. This is another interesting, watch, boom, that's a rain bomb. That is rain hitting the ground. Look at that. I mean, would you like to be underneath that one? My word. Anyway, these things are getting much more intense as well. Going to heat. Hotter years typically have more fires. You can see here that unfortunately this only takes us through 2018. Imagine what 2020 is going to look like on this chart. They're going to have to redraw this thing because it's going to go well above what you're looking at here. In fact, let's talk about, so in 2018, if you remember, the Camp Fire in Paradise, California, destroyed that town. 86 people died. That burned 156,000 acres. And by comparison, look what's happening now. So right now in California, the August Complex Fire has burned over 1 million acres to become the first mega fire ever. And it's still only 65% contained, by the way. In the past, the Mendocino Complex Fire was the largest, and that was in 2018. But look at the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth have all been burning, still burning, or have burned this year. The Glass Fire, which you probably read about, is destroying, vineyards in Napa County. That's still ongoing. Year to date, our fires in California have burned over 4 million acres. The previous record was 2018, 1.7 million acres. And again, just like the hurricane season, the fire season here is only half over. So if people tell you this is a hoax or that global warming is not having an impact on us, show them these numbers because they're astounding. And worldwide, it's the same thing, okay? Here's a chart that shows worldwide weather catastrophes, and you can see this trend is still going up and up and up. Now, I mentioned before that global warming can cause extreme cold. Yeah, in fact, in February of 2018, the temperature at the North Pole hit 50 degrees higher than normal. 50 degrees, that's huge. You say, well, how did that happen? Well, there was an extreme hot weather event in eastern Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, I should say, that moved north, okay? And what happened was it hit the polar vortex. Now, polar vortex, you may have read about in the paper, but it's just a bunch of cold air that just kind of circles around the North Pole, huh? But what happened was that heat wave from Asia, and hopefully this chart will start moving, moved forward and crunched into that polar vortex and caused it to split. And so it sent really cold air into the northeastern part of the US and really cold air into Europe. The impact of that was, the boardwalk along Lake Michigan, for example, froze over. I've got pictures of it, which I can't show you, unfortunately. But the temperatures plummeted to a minus 22 degrees, minus 50 wind chill. I have a niece, Lisa, who lives just outside of Chicago, and she said they couldn't go outside for 3 days because it hurt their lungs to breathe. That is bad, okay? In England, at the same point in time, Trafalgar Square froze over, the fountain, and you had snow and ice hitting the Colosseum in Rome. Just an amazing events. Sea level rise. Top 10 cities at risk. Notice two of those are number 1 and number 3 are New York, which means that if the sea level rises by a certain amount, you're going to see both of those cities with an extreme amount of flooding. More closer to home, San Francisco Bay Area, if the glaciers and the ice sheets up in the north continue to melt at the current rate, and we have a 20-foot increase in sea level rise, which they're predicting before the end of the century, the San Francisco airport, the Oakland airport will both be underwater, as will major parts of Fremont and Hayward and Alviso and all points south in San Jose. So, and this, we may not see it, but our grandchildren will certainly be around to see this if this happens. This is why we need to take action now. We cannot let this happen. Food is also suffering with increased flooding and drought. You see, and fires. You see lower yields. You see lower nutrition, and this is becoming a problem, especially in third world countries. Water is also being affected because a lot of that water, like the water you saw in Texas, that didn't sink into the ground. That all just kind of ran off into the ocean because there wasn't enough time. So you got runoff, you got melting ice, which is causing sea level rise. You got drought, which is in certain areas is less water. And then on the other side, you have agriculture and other industries that are demanding more and more water. Agriculture, by the way, uses 70% of the fresh water that we have. How about health? So health also, because of the increases in air pollution, extreme weather events, you see more infectious disease, more allergens in the air, people suffering from heat stress. We talked about less food and less water available. So these are all negative impactors on our health. And these are all interrelated. So worldwide, and this is a statistic I don't think hardly anybody really knows, worldwide air pollution kills over 9 million people every year. Now, we don't hear about it in this country, but third world countries for sure, China and India also suffer from air pollution, and a lot of people die from that. So again, this is not acceptable. Tropical diseases. So on this chart, watch closely where the little asterisks are, because that's where the tropical diseases start. Notice they're all around the equator, and look how they're moving north and south. And the reason why is because as the planet heats north and south of the equator, these little guys have found a new place to live. So we are looking and experiencing that right now. Species extinction, again, another negative impact of global warming. We are at risk of losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. Scientists tell us that this is the largest mass extinction on this planet since the extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. So, and unfortunately, this time it's not a meteor that's causing this, it's us, okay? It's human beings. Now, the cost of carbon, my students like this cash register thing. The cost of carbon is a lot more severe than what we think, because if you actually look at it's not just how much it costs to drill and extract carbon from the ground, it's all of the economic costs, the related things like floods and wildfires and drought and storm damage and ocean acidification, which is killing our coral reefs, climate refugees, species, all of these things are part of the cost of carbon, because carbon is causing these things to happen. And in fact, the World Economic Forum says that this is the #1 threat to the global economy. Scientific studies. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in October of 2018 issued a report. They do this every 6 years. They assess the impact. And they looked at the impact of a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase over a 2.0 degree Celsius increase since 1880, again, the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And when we look at, you say, well, gee, 1.5, 2.0 Celsius doesn't seem like much. Think about this. Everything we've looked at so far, all the hurricane stuff and all the fire and all that stuff I've been talking about, this has all happened, and we have yet to reach a 1 degree Celsius increase since the Industrial Revolution, just a tad below. So think about that, and think about us getting to a 1.5 degree, which is what we're trying to hold it to in the Paris Accords, or a 2.0 degree impact, which is really the direction we're headed. The impact of what we're seeing could be significantly worse than what we're experiencing right now. And the time frame of this report, originally 6 years ago, they were saying, 2050. Now they're saying, no, it's happening now. In fact, 2030 is when we're going to see the bad, that 1.5 degree increase. So we can't let that happen. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let the federal government drag their feet. We need to get people in there who are going to take action. There was also a U.S. national climate assessment done, the 4th one. We don't ever know about these things, right? But this assessment acknowledged that global warming is real and concluded that human activity is the dominant driver. And you're saying, wait a minute, this is a huge departure from what our federal government is putting out, right? They're denying that climate change even exists. And here's our own U.S. National Climate Report saying, no, it's real and we are the cause of it. So again, you say, well, why didn't we hear about it? Well, they actually released the report on Black Friday. And you say, well, why did they release it on that date? Because nobody was paying attention to the news on that date, right? All interested in the ads. We're all going through this horrific coronavirus crisis right now, and there are some comparisons. When you take a look at the pandemic, which happens quickly, right? The impact, it just came upon us within a few months it became a worldwide event. And so people get really excited about it. Climate crisis happens very slowly over many, many years, and it's hard to get people excited about it. The pandemic accelerates quickly, kind of peaks and flattens out, and who knows where it's going right now. The climate crisis accelerates slowly, but it doesn't flatten out. It just keeps getting slowly worse, okay? When the Arctic melts, it's gone, right? It's gone. When sea level rise, mass migration, there's 1 billion people who live along the edge of the ocean. Where are they gonna go? You're gonna have this gigantic migration of people, and that's gonna be permanent as well. Wetter wets, hotter hots, drier dries forever. And by the way, a lot of that information is from Thomas Friedman, New York Times. Have we learned anything from the pandemic? Well, yeah, one thing is inaction has caused many lives. 210,000 people have died in this country alone, and over 1 million worldwide. So we have to take action. I mean, we've done shelter in place, we've done staying at home, we've done social distancing as far as the pandemic is concerned. But when you go to the climate change, the actions are a little bit different. We have to shift to renewable energy. We have to decarbonize power generation. And we have to incentivize cars, buildings, and workplaces to become carbon free. We have to reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting out into that atmosphere and be just as focused and vigilant on that as we are on the pandemic. And what must we not do is go back to business as usual. And I don't think we will, quite frankly. I think things have changed dramatically, and I don't see us going back. But the impact on minorities and poor have been much worse because these folks live closer to where the oil and the coal are extracted, and they're also more vulnerable because of the impact of climate and quite frankly the lack of medical care. We can't all go to Walter Reed Hospital. The other thing is that we've observed that lower emissions were significant, have been significant, and are still significant. So we know that we can lower emissions dramatically if we have a mind to doing it. I love this one. This is the US Department of Defense, and this is 6 years ago, saying climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages. And I'm like, oh yeah, pandemic disease. I mean, these guys must have had a crystal ball. Disputes over refugees, we're seeing that. And natural disasters across the globe. All of this is exactly what they were predicting back in 2014. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the administration listened. Final slide in this segment. We're talking about some very minute changes in temperature, right? 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.0. And you say, well, how can that have a big impact? Well, think about this. If the temperature Fahrenheit is slightly less than 32 degrees, you have ice. If it's slightly more than 32 degrees, you have water. We call this a tipping point. And unfortunately, what's happening is that tipping point is moving north and south. And so as that temperature continues to move north, you have more ice becoming water. And that's kind of what's happening across the planet. So a very minor degree makes a big difference. So is it real? Yes, I hope I've been able to demonstrate to you the fact that it is absolutely real and we must absolutely change. So can we? So things get a little bit more positive now, folks. I'm giving you all the bad news. Can we change? So yeah, we have the solutions at hand right now, and it's called clean renewable energy. Let's take a look at wind. So wind capacity, you'll notice, especially in the last 10 years, has just increased dramatically. Now, I will have to tell you, this is a small percentage of the total, but the direction is what's important, and it is going up dramatically right now. And the reason why we're able to do that is because the cost of generating onshore wind has been decreasing dramatically over time. And quite frankly, there's enough wind available to supply the worldwide consumption of electricity 40 times over. So there's plenty of wind. All we have to do is build the wind turbines to make that happen. Solar, again, look at what's going on in the last 10 years with solar installations, okay, has gone up dramatically in terms of gigawatts being generated. And how is that able to happen? Because the cost of solar cell modules has dropped dramatically from almost $80 a watt down to, and actually it's under 25 cents a watt right now. It's like Gordon Moore's law for chips. I mean, this is what's going on. And so we're able to build solar modules much cheaper. In fact, if you look at this is in South Sudan in Africa. And you see a lot of this. Here's a grass hut, but they have power. They can reach the internet. They can run their computers because they can buy these kinds of solar panels very cheaply. So why don't we see it? You know, if it really is cheaper, why don't we see, you know, the result of that right here? Well, you know, look at global energy subsidies. You know, you say, oh, gee, they're subsidizing renewables to a tune of 143 billion. Yeah, but they're subsidizing fossil fuels to the tune of 5.3 trillion, or like 37 times as much. This is the problem. This is why, you know, you see the cost of gas and oil, you know, competitive with renewables. It's the only reason, because if you take that away, if you take away those subsidies and you look at normalized or levelized cost of energy in this country, you'll see the nuclear is by far the most expensive, followed by coal, and then followed by gas. And one of the reasons why coal is being replaced by gas is it's less expensive. But look at renewables. Renewables, both solar and wind, are cheaper than gas. The only thing that keeps them up is because of the subsidies. So we do have at our disposal cheaper forms of fuel, namely wind and solar. In fact, there's enough solar energy that hits the earth every hour to fill the world's energy needs for a year. So a prodigious amount of energy is available there. So we have to talk about storage capacity, because when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine, you know, we have an issue. Now, 2016, which you just saw on the last chart, is this little tiny thing here. And the result of the next 20 years is an astronomical increase in the amount of storage capacity. And there's a couple reasons why I believe this will happen. One, again, look at the cost of lithium-ion batteries over the last 8 years has gone down 80%, more than 80%. So the cost of lithium-ion batteries is going way down. And new capacity. Here's the amount of money that's being invested in renewables versus fossil fuels. And you notice this year, there'll be twice as much money invested in renewables. By 2025, that goes to 3 times as much. And by 2030, it goes to at least 4 times as much. So, and this is Bloomberg, New Energy Finance. I mean, they're a very reputable forecasting firm. And they're saying, hey, the smart money is going into renewables, not into fossil fuels. So that's going to help with the battery situation as well. Auto manufacturers, every auto manufacturer is moving to electric models that they either have them in production or coming out with them this year. So all of the major, in fact, I think they're all there, auto manufacturers have electric vehicles. And you say, well, gee, electric vehicles are expensive. Well, right now they are. Now here's the cost of fossil fuel, the powertrain for a fossil fuel car. Here's the mainstream electric battery projected costs moving forward. And you can see that in only about 2 years, it's going to cross over, so that the cost of a powertrain for an electric vehicle is going to be less expensive than a fossil fuel car. When that happens, you're going to see a huge shift to electric vehicles. So this is a very hopeful sign that, for the future, because quite frankly, cars and trucks are one of the hugest sources of CO2. So this is my favorite slide, of course. This is the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum. And you notice that in 2017, they put solar panels on their roof because they estimated they could save $8,000 to $10,000 a year in energy costs. Now, this has to be the irony of ironies when you look at the coal mining museum putting solar panels on their roof. I love it. So, can we change? Yes. We have what we need. We just have to have the will to do it. So, absolutely, we can change. And now the important question is, will we? So, in 2015, every country in the world agreed to work together to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the mid-century, meaning 2050. The good news is that the US cannot legally withdraw until the day after the 2020 presidential election. So I am sure that even if there's a new president, they will probably withdraw, but the new president could pull us right back in again. So with very little harm done. But the U.S. cannot pull out of this agreement. Every other country is they look up to us. If we pull out, it would be a disaster for the environment and for this planet. Well, people say, well, what about China and India? They pollute way more than we do. In total emissions, yes, they do. But on a per capita basis, if you look at how much pollution is emitted on a per capita basis, meaning head count people, it doesn't even come close. We pollute far more. But more importantly than that, they are both on their way to overachieving their Paris commitments. And you say, well, how does that work? Well, look at new energy capacity in China. 53% of it came from solar and wind. Now, China is undoubtedly the largest consumer of coal, but as they continue to move, and they are, by the way, the #1 manufacturer of solar panels in the world. And as they continue to move towards solar, you're going to see less and less of a requirement from this country on coal. So very positive sign here. My second favorite slide is this one. This is a solar array in China. You can only obviously see this from the air, but I never figured the Chinese government to have much of a sense of humor, but you got to love this slide because it's great. India, even better, 65% of their new capacity came from solar and wind, and again, reducing the amount of dependence on coal. So that again is a very favorable direction. Europe, of course, is the winner of all. The 88% of their new capacity built was either solar or wind. Coal is almost non-existent. How about the U.S.? Well, U.S. 49% of new capacity was from gas, from solar and wind, and that's actually increasing. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. And natural gas makes up the rest. Notice that coal is non-existent. And that's because natural gas is cheaper than coal. And so they're not building any new coal plants. It's all going to be, either natural gas, solar, or wind. So no question, coal consumption is dropping like a rock and will continue to drop and hopefully will eventually go away. In fact, the U.S. is going to retire an additional 13 gigawatts of coal-fired plants in this year. And in that same time frame, they're going to add an additional 186 gigawatts of wind and solar. So that percentage of energy that's being generated by wind and solar, is going to obviously shift even more so. There's also the talk of jobs. People say, well, this is threatening jobs. Actually, the two fastest growing occupations in the United States are solar panel installers and wind turbine technicians. And this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay? So this is the government's own report. Fastest growing jobs, solar and wind. Some of the others, private firefighters, well, if you live in California and you want to, not that I would want to do that, but yeah. Over 190 companies have made a commitment to go 100% renewable. I mean, there's a list here and you can look through there real quick because I'm not going to dwell on this, but virtually every major corporation is on this list. 20 states representing 49% of the American people have formed a climate alliance led by California, New York, and Washington. And basically what they're saying is, hey, look, if the government gets us out of the Paris Accord, we're going to operate as if we're still in it. So they're going to, all of these states, and California is huge because, as you probably know, we're the 5th largest, by itself, we would be the 5th largest economy in the world. So this is important because these states are saying, hey, we're staying with the Paris Agreement no matter what. In 2020, all new homes in California are required to integrate solar energy and energy efficiency into their construction, and this is the first state to do so. In 2018, when Jerry Brown was leaving office, he signed legislation that requires by 2045, 100% of the state's electricity will be carbon free. And the entire state will be carbon neutral by 2045. So this is huge because again, we have a huge impact on the world. And this is a great place to be. Big money. So having a finance background, this kind of speaks to me because as far as I'm concerned, where big money goes is where the future is going, okay? And here's BlackRock, who's the world's largest investment manager. They have like $6 trillion in assets under their management. And they're issuing a warning to their investors about the risk of climate change. And they're basically saying that the markets are underpricing climate risk, which means their securities are overvalued, okay, because they're underpricing the risk associated with climate change. And so they're giving people warning, hey, be careful about your investments in anything that has to do with fossil fuel industry, because climate change is real. And boy, when you have big money recognizing that, that's big. What about the Federal Reserve? Here's another big money impactor. And Lael Brainerd is one of the Federal Reserve governors, and she says that the federal government is already considering the impacts of climate change on long-term monetary policy. And that climate change is now a major factor when they decide whether or not they're going to raise or lower long-term interest rates. I mean, this is huge. I mean, this is huge that, you know, that they are looking at climate risk as a huge issue in the economic growth of this country in the future. So that's what the bigger picture is doing. What about you? What can you do? Well, a couple of real obvious ones: going solar and driving electric can be choices that you can make. Now, we installed our solar panels. It's coming on a year. In fact, in late November will be exactly 1 year anniversary for our solar panels. My electric car is now a year old. I bought it in August of last year. So, and I'm thrilled. And by the way, I have a Tesla Model 3. And it is absolutely the most fantastic car I've ever owned. And kind of an aside story here, I had to rent a car recently and I had to gas it up. When I returned it, I found myself befuddled by pulling into a gas station for the first time in over a year, trying to figure out, okay, now what do I do? And where's the button to, anyway, my problem. The other thing you can do if you can't afford, and by the way, solar panels, you can get solar panels up on your roof. If you own your roof, you can basically get them up there for free, and pay for it. You know, they have a lot of these financing arrangements where they pay for it by the savings that you get in energy. But if you can't afford to do that right now, or you can't afford an electric car yet, you can do this. Everybody can do this one. Now, I know I'm talking to an audience across the country, but in the Bay Area, and you might want to check this out, there are what we call community choice energy associations that are connected with your city or county. And these organizations buy the energy from the manufacturer or from the creators of that energy. And in our case, provide it to PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, and PG&E still delivers the energy to us. And right now, if you live in, let's say, Silicon Valley, you are getting 50% of your energy right now is clean, and 50% is fossil fuel. If you want, you can, all you have to do is email and say, hey, I want to go to 100%, choose their Green Prime program, and within a day or two, they will buy enough clean energy to provide you with 100% green, clean energy. And that you can do. This chart says it'll cost you about $3.60 a month more. I think that's a temporary impact because of the cost of clean energy going down. But $3.60, come on, folks, we're talking about a latte a month here. So it's not like it's going to break your bank to do this, but what it will do is help the planet. So in fact, I've been doing this for 1.5 years now, and my cost, I bet, because I track it, I'm an accountant, right, has been less than $2 a month. So it's a very inexpensive way to do something good for your planet. What else can you do? Vote. Okay, we got the big national election coming up in a few weeks. We have local elections. You got to vote pro-climate. You know, for the legislation, for the candidates. Vote, please vote, and encourage everybody you know to vote. It's so important. A couple of nice educational films out there. Ice on Fire is an HBO documentary by Leonardo DiCaprio, and it kind of talks about a lot of the futuristic technologies that are under development to actually pull CO2 out of the atmosphere. I kind of like that aspect of it. The other one is Kiss the Ground. This is narrated by Woody Harrelson, and this just came out a couple of weeks ago on Netflix. And it's about how regenerative agriculture is working to sequester CO2 into the dirt. And it's really an amazing film because it gives me a lot of hope too that because this is really a way to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere using nature, using trees, using plants to sequester CO2 back into the ground. So it's really an interesting one, and I'm actually going to practice that myself. I have a couple of cousins who are in the agribusiness in the San Joaquin Valley, and they both looked at this, and they're both going to be starting to implement a lot of what this is saying in their own farms. So really interesting stuff. What else can you do? Become a climate activist. This is not the time to be shy, especially over the next 3 or 4 weeks. All right, to engage in conversations with everybody you know, and make sure that they are on board with with what's at stake here in this election. To join in with strikes and demonstrations. I walked with the young folks a year ago September when they had the worldwide strikes, and it was really an amazing experience to capture all of that energy that they have. Electrifying your home. So Beth and I just installed a heat pump, water heater. We're looking to replace all of our gas appliances. So, this is just a, ongoing process of what we're trying to accomplish since we have the solar panels to now have all electric appliances in our house. The other thing is join an organization. Now, you all obviously already have, you're with Elders Climate Action. And the reason why I mention this is because, these organizations will keep you, Jen does a great job of putting information out, and the whole organization does a great job of to keep you up to date on the issues and what's happening and things that you need to know. So, being part of an organization like Elders Climate Action is extremely important. And, you can also donate. I mean, if you can't go march or do something else, we absolutely could, would appreciate, your financing what we're trying to do here, which is so important. EAN, Elders Action Network, has a big program going for, to try to create a fair and safe election for elders. Okay, so we want to make sure that elders are able to exercise their right to vote, that there's a voting place that's COVID safe, that's fair, it's easy, that they can get to, and that their votes will be counted. This is a bit in doubt these days, and so we have about 1,000 volunteers working on this right now to make sure this happens. So getting out the vote, making sure that people are conscious and that they're being told, hey, we need you to vote, protecting the process in the voting places, make sure people aren't intimidated at the voting places, making sure that they know how to get their vote by mail in or where to deliver it. And right now we're working very heavily in 6 states, Arizona, Florida, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, swing states, working very, very hard to make those as safe and as fair as we possibly can. So that's a huge effort. And again, we're raising money for that as well. Still other things you can do. Writing letters, calling your congressman, your representatives and your senators, or if you don't call, write or email them. This has a huge impact. They count all these responses that they get, and they calculate it as a % of their constituency. And the more we do this, the more we email them, the more we send letters, the more we call them, that all counts. And if they see that their constituency really wants this, that's how they're going to vote. So that's how we can influence at a much larger scale. Talking to your place of worship, seeing if they can, would be amenable to, calling for climate action in that community, reaching out to your friends and relatives. So I started a weekly climate newsletter about 1.5 years ago. And, so I keep my friends and relatives informed about what I know and what I'm able to do. And I put my email on there as a very, selfless act of self-aggrandizement there. But if you're interested, you can ask me and I will be happy to put you on that list. But with ECA providing you with all information, you're being well cared for. As far as Climate Reality is concerned, there was a sequel to An Inconvenient Truth. Goris put out a book, Truth to Power, and a film by the same name. So if that's something that you want to do some additional reading on, this is a book I would highly recommend. So in conclusion, just to sit back for a second and think, what if we were successful? What if we really made this happen? What would the world look like? How about less smoggy days? How about fewer devastating forest fires? Milder weather events, reduced immigration, more abundant and healthier food, improved health, improved visibility, improved biodiversity, and a safe and healthy future for our children and our grandchildren. So use your voice, use your vote, and use your choices, and speak truth to power like your world depends on it, because your world depends on it. Thank you. And Jen and Francis, if we want to, I'll stop sharing and we can go to Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. That was just, it's always so in-depth. That's just in-depth presentation, and coming out of Al Gore's ongoing slide deck of slides, that there's no lack of information out there. It's always so fascinating to me to just see it every time I see it, and just hear that information reiterated, but also really see those changes in the cost of the solutions coming down and things like that. And those types of things just gave me a lot of hope, and make me feel like, okay, we got this, we can do this. If you have questions, please either submit your questions in the Q&A box, or you can also submit your questions in the chat box. Either one, I'm monitoring both. So please submit some questions to our panelists. And one question that's come in is can we get access to this presentation? And so two things. One is we'll be sending out a recording to everybody who RSVP'd for this call, and that will be going out on Monday. I'm taking the day off tomorrow, so you won't get it till Monday. But you will receive that. And two, I would like to encourage you all to, if you're not a climate reality trained leader, I'm going to drop the link in the chat box, and I'll also drop the link in the email that goes out with the recording. But I encourage you to sign up to receive alerts about upcoming trainings. Climate Reality just did 2 online trainings. We had a number of Elders Climate Action members that did those online trainings, which were great because you didn't have to travel, it was COVID safe, all of those things. They might be doing more, and there may be more even before the year's over, who knows? So so follow this link and give them your information, and they'll let you know when those trainings are coming up.
And remember that you don't all have to become climate reality leaders and do what I'm doing. This is, can be highly informational for you, and it's something that you can share information with friends and family with.
Right. Climate Reality encourages people to go out and, be talking about climate in their communities and making presentations and things like that. But really, it's just about getting people comfortable and talking about climate.
Right.
And that's what I think is the real importance and value, where the real importance and value lies. So let's get to a couple of questions here. What about consumption? There's evidence that plastic will bypass fossil fuel by 2050 as a producer of CO2. So what are your thoughts on consumption? And either one of you, Bill or Francis, or maybe both of you want to chime in.
I think, consumption is a huge part of this, and we have a society that's become very dependent on plastic. I mean, it's almost impossible to buy anything that doesn't have 10 layers of plastic around it, which is not necessarily something that consumers are looking for. So I think there's definitely going to be a push to decrease plastic consumption, but there also will be a push from the fossil fuel companies to increase plastic consumption as fossil fuel use for other purposes goes down. So that's something we really have to keep a close eye on. There'll be a lot of development of alternatives, a lot to the way we're using plastics now. One approach to doing it is to basically tax fossil fuels, so that whether you're making it into a piece of plastic or making it into gasoline, that's going to cost something. So that those costs that we're all bearing as health problems and disasters and other things becomes something that the fossil fuel producers are paying as part of the cost of doing business. Now that's not just so that they can get a free ride. Oh, I paid my tax, I don't, I'm good. But if that price is set high enough, that will push that consumption down and make alternatives, whether it's an electric car or a different way of packaging things, much more viable.
And I would say pay attention to legislation. There's been a lot of legislation recently in California about single-use plastics, about taxing, as Francis is saying, and reducing the use of plastic in general. So and making it either recyclable or reusable. So look at legislation. Legislation has a real far-reaching impact, and to the extent that you can participate and explain that. I know that our local ECA chapter does a lot of explaining on issues like this and making sure that our constituency knows, hey, here's a bill coming up. We want you to work on, to vote on this, and to email and let your legislators know we want you to pass this legislation.
Great, thank you. I would also add, I think, we need to be constantly thinking about how to innovate and utilize these materials that are already here, that we've already created, that we've already made, how to repurpose things, and how to make things that we're going to need in the future out of things that exist already on this planet without having to make more of it.
Here's my plastic bag. I continue to use it and reuse it and reuse it. But, that's just my little contribution. And I keep it right here so that I always have it by me in case I need one. So there you go.
I just saw a friend of mine and had a post on social media with a whole thread of all of us posting our pictures of our Ziploc bag wash stations in our kitchens, our drying racks,
right?
Which is just funny. But I think we have to start to think about, what we buy, but then the life cycle of that thing in its entirety. And I think that all has to start to become factored in too.
Yep.
I think people are becoming much more aware of how problematic plastic recycling is. That people think of plastic as being one thing, but there are a huge variety of plastics, and you buy an object made out of plastic, and sometimes there's several different plastics involved in that one object. So it's very challenging to recycle all that. Now, we may get new technologies that will make that easier, but a lot of it is going to be figuring out ways to do things without being so reliant on plastic.
Right. Well, we are about to run out of time. It is right at the end of the hour. It was a quick hour. It goes by so fast, especially when there's so many things for us to talk about. And I think it's just a great reminder that maybe we might need to do this again soon and have more opportunity for in-depth question and answer session. But one quick question that came up, and I think it's important for us to address real quick, and without being partisan, if possible, is that the question is, where may a Biden administration fall short of the needs or the targeted needs? And then also I'm going to combine that with another question that is, what needs to be the focus on lobbying a Democratic Senate? And I would say lobbying in general, lobbying a Senate in our transition to whatever the administration looks like. Do either of you have any thoughts on what our push really needs to be?
Well, I think if you look at the Biden platform, it's really improved a great deal, especially with working with the Sanders campaign and other people to really enlarge that. So a lot of it's going to have to be, it's one thing to have a platform, it's another thing to pass legislation, and to really look at how can we make those things into legislation and get that passed and get those things implemented. Also, I have, having just come from a CCL meeting right before this, I would say also that carbon fee and dividend is an excellent complement to all of that. So, and if you haven't looked at VECA, definitely, there are lots of policy statements out there, the Thrive Agenda, the VECA, lots of other things that we should probably spend a whole hour or so talking about, and probably actually will be talking about it for an hour and a half in January. So definitely come back for that.
And I would just add on the Democratic Senate, finally, if we do, and I pray that we do have a Democratic Senate, that we can actually get something done. I've been sending emails and letters to my senators, and the nice thing about that is they write me back, okay? And they tell me what their position is and what they're doing about it. So it's a great two-way street, because obviously it's their staffers that are, I'm not getting direct emails from Dianne Feinstein, for example, but I do get a response from her every time I send a letter or an email. So, and again, that counts. And to the extent that we continue to do that and to continue to talk to our legislators, they're going to take, us, they're going to take that into consideration. Okay, here's what my constituency wants. And if we do happen to have a Democratic controlled Senate, that's, that's more likely to have a positive impact on the environment.
And I will just close with adding that the Vision for Equitable Climate Action, I just dropped a link. I will also share that link with the recording. And the Vision for Equitable Climate Action is a set of sort of policy benchmarks, if you will, that can function as a guidance to help guide the process of policymaking around climate action. And so we at ECA support the Vision for Equitable Climate Action, and we encourage all of you to see how you can utilize the outlined benchmarks of VECA in your own communities and in contacting your own local elected officials, and making sure that we are contacting people. We're contacting people at every level of elected officials and letting them know that climate change is real and climate action is critical. That's part of our civic duties, in my opinion. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. And please plan to join us. We are hosting a 3-part workshop series coming up this fall in November, December, and January. There'll be 1 workshop per month, and it'll be focused on policy and influencing policy as individuals and collectively as an organization. The first one in November will be in local policy, the second on state policy, and the third will be starting the year off in January, looking at federal policy and looking at the different ways that our members are out acting on local, state, and federal policy, and things and ways that you can impact local, state, and federal policy. So watch out for those bulletins and that information, and make sure you join us. And thanks so much for joining us this evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jen, for taking time from your day off, quote. That's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Francis.
All right.
Have a good evening.